Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd. Chris Boyd is a certified financial planner practitioner and senior vice president financial advisor at Wealth Enhancement Group, one of the nation's largest registered investment advisors. We call it Something More because we'd like to talk not only about those important dollar and cents issues, but also the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Here he is, your fulfillment facilitator, your partner in prosperity, advising clients on Cape Cod and across the country. Here's your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being with us for another segment of Something More with Chris Boyd. I'm here with Jeff Perry and Russ Ball. We are all of the AMR team at Wealth Enhancement Group, and glad to have you with us for another segment. Today, we're talking about donor-advised funds. It's starting to get more traction, but this is a well-kept secret. I love donor-advised funds as a resource, as a tool. We're going to talk about some of the details about how they work, some of the pros and cons, and some of the things to think about if you were to consider using a donor-advised fund. Why would someone consider a donor-advised fund? There's probably a lot of reasons. I'm going to start with one of them has to do with current tax law.
Sure does.
And that current, you want to hit on that, Jeff?
Well, I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Well, since the Tax Cut and Jobs Act and the reductions in taxes and all those changes that were made, charitable deductions, if you take the standard deduction, which most people do, you don't get to deduct individual contributions to charities.
Right.
And so, and it's tough to get up to these levels of deductions to make it worth your while not to take the standard deduction. Right. So a reason, not to go on a tangent, a reason to use a donor advised fund is you can contribute all at once. You can
bundle, as they say, right?
Yeah,
multiple years.
If you give $5,000 a year to charities and you have the available cash, you can say, okay, I'm gonna $50,000 for the next 10 years, and you can put it in a donor advised fund. Doesn't mean you're gonna give it all away, but you've donated it to the fund. Therefore, you qualify to deduct that $50,000 as a charitable contribution, and the decisions where it goes can be made later.
Yeah, essentially that's it. So we should talk about what a donor advised fund is in just a second. We'll backtrack a little bit, but this is one of the motivators. I can make a single charitable donation to this donor advised fund that essentially I can have control, and I'm putting air quotes around that, in the sense that I can later on advise where I want that money to go. That's the A in donor advised fund. I can say I want, let's say, for example, I have a charity that I like to give to, the XYZ charity, the church of whatever, the hospital, the college. You can fill in the blank, right?
Yep.
If I and maybe I do multiple charities. I don't just do a single charitable entity. I do all of those. But in a given year, I don't give so much that I would benefit from getting the more than the standard deduction.
Right.
So I could give multiple years to this donor advised fund, get more than my standard deduction because of that circumstance, because of the charitable deduction that I might benefit from by contributing that to this donor advised fund, and then dole it out over years, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it happens to be, that I might have otherwise bundled in this situation. It allows me to get the benefit of the standard deduction and periodically the charitable giving deduction that I want to have enhanced tax benefit from, which ultimately people don't just give for a tax benefit.
No,
but if you can,
if you're giving anyway,
right? Yeah, right. Might as well. So, okay, what's a donor advised fund? Russ, you want to start us off, or you want me to do it? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, why don't you start it
All
off?
right, start us off. So, the essence of a donor advised fund is a charitable entity. It's usually offered by a foundation. Lots of brokerage platforms offer these. There are others. So we've had exposure with the American Endowment Foundation. There's charitable funds with Schwab and Fidelity and lots of others, like local Cape Cod Foundation we've had on many times as a guest on our show. All of these offer a donor advised fund. Okay, so essentially you could create your own fund, like an endowment of sorts,
Sure.
but a lot less administrative headache. So
Virtually none, right?
well, it's minimal. Yeah,
Right.
it's minimal, right?
Yep.
And so essentially, yeah, virtually none. So I can. There's some cost associated with it, but
Right.
ultimately, it's modest. We'll talk about that in a minute or two. The essence is, though, I can create this fund, and in this fund, I get to put the funds I want into it. I can do stocks or securities of different kinds, or I could put in. Um, uh, Sometimes I could put in things like real estate or things that might be sometimes difficult to transact. It depends on where I'm doing it and what they
What their rules are, right?
yeah.
Yep.
But cash can be put into it as well. But we might be inclined to want to use highly appreciated assets
Right.
as a preferred tool to
Yeah,
put into
I
it.
often think of someone creating the fund with a highly appreciated asset like a stock they've had forever.
That's right.
Right.
That's a great example of
Mhm.
like why would you do that? Maybe to elaborate on that,
Yeah,
Jeff.
so you don't sell it. Technically, you are donating it, so you never have the capital gains that are embedded in that long-term held stock.
And in the process, you get the benefit of the full market value
Correct.
as what's considered the contribution. So you've avoided that big capital gain.
And the charitable fund, the donor advised fund, doesn't pay taxes on it either. They just get the stepped up basis.
They get it, and because they're not taxed as a because they're a
Right. They never
charitable
get it.
entity,
Right.
they
Right.
just get to transact the stock to make it useful if we wanted to, give cash or
It's as
whatever,
good as cash to the
or
fund.
they could,
Yeah.
then that's some choices we'll talk about in a minute. How the money's held once it's donated into the donor advised fund, but they don't. There's not a tax event for the charitable entity.
Or for you.
Or for you.
Right.
So that's appreciated to be able to use these highly appreciated assets as a way to do it. In any case, so the fund essentially says, okay, we'll accept these assets, and then you can leave them in there for a while, or you can turn around and donate them immediately. Or as we said, I want to dole it out over. I put 5 years worth of my charitable giving into a
Right.
single occasion. Oh, great. You can dole out 5 years or whatever it might be if you wanted to. Sometimes people do these because they want the charitable deduction, but they really don't know exactly
Mhm.
what they want to do for the charitable intention just yet. And we can talk about that in a moment as well. I think that's something that's worth talking about, the non-financial benefits of a donor advised fund, values benefits. But so just going back to conceptually, the fund is created, you put the assets in, you get immediate benefit from a tax planning point of view, and then you can choose to dole it out, quickly, gradually, leave it for a while and then donate it. You have all these options available to you.
Yep.
So ultimately, it is intended. Keep in mind, this is charitable giving. What you donate to a donor advised fund is not your money anymore. It is going to charitable intention. Whether it does it immediately or indirectly, through this donor advised fund, it gets there later. But it does have the opportunity to compound and grow.
Mhm.
So you could, in some instances, you can invest that money and later on make that donation. Now, one of the things I was started to make mention of is the values component of
Mhm.
this. This is part of the thing I like best about these
Yeah.
donor advised funds. You like this too, Jeff? I see you're
do.
like, yeah.
Yep.
So the idea is like, okay, I want to instill values in my family. Perhaps I want to pass on not only wealth but a value system of like one of the things that we do as a family. We want to say, imagine the person saying in their mind, I want to instill community values. I want to instill the notion that we do for others, as we, so they might create this donor advised fund, not strictly as a tax benefit, though it has that,
Mhm.
but also with the notion of saying, okay, as part of our planning, we're going to pass on values of, hey, this is important to us to make a priority of giving to our community, or wherever it might be, certain causes or priorities. So family, let's together come up with a plan each year as to who we're going to prioritize for our charitable giving through our donor advised fund. And so there's an opportunity for parents and children, I picture these as adult children, but could be young children, to say, hey, let's do this collaboratively. And, as I think about my family, I think, gosh, if we do this, this could be challenging, because we have some of my family, we have very different priorities in our charitable giving. Our political alignments are very different. Our priorities as far as like who should we be donating to could be very different. So on the one hand, that could be a great exchange of ideas. On the other hand, it could be challenging. But I think that's probably a value too. The idea of saying, okay, how do we deal with things when we don't agree?
Yeah.
Like, okay,
that context, right?
Yeah. Right. So in any case, I could see, family saying, yeah, let's this be like really important to me. And then how do we respond to that? Okay, well, let's do what's important to you this year.
Like a mini
Let's
board
do what's
of
important to
directors.
you next year. Let's do what's important to you another year. We could, go through the family. You know what I mean?
I love it.
Yeah. And similarly, you could otherwise say, no, we want consensus. What can we all agree on? That's another. But these are the kind of things you'd have that opportunity to deliberate about and periodically make decisions around. The big picture, though, is that notion of what are you saying to your family by saying, I've dedicated assets, I've allocated money to this priority, which I think I want to say, I hope you will have as a priority too, that we care about community and we want to be able to give back in various ways. I love that.
The other thing I like about the donor advised funds is that it doesn't lock you into a specific charity. Let's say I'm imagining this scenario, and your kids are growing up, and they have maybe, let's say you say, all right, each kid is going to get X amount of dollars from this donor advised fund to this charity. So you can divvy it up rather than doing everything into one charity in one year.
That's right.
So you have a lot of flexibility once the money is in the donor advised fund. And then as your kids, for example, grow up, their priorities might change. They might have different charitable leanings that they like a different organization, or they want to contribute to something else.
Yeah. Charitable organizations change too, right? Maybe, I don't necessarily want to give to that because that's evolved or that's changed, or maybe its focus has moved on or something.
That certainly happens. Yeah.
Or that charity isn't as efficient with the dollars they spend. We want to look at who's having the most impact, right? I think that notion of impact investing.
Or something new comes to light, some new cause or something, in the family, something you're affected by something that's happened to the family.
Thinking of an illness, maybe.
Right.
Like, okay,
exactly.
Now we want to prioritize donating to a cause that affects research for cancer, or, fill in the blank, right?
Yep. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So these are all kinds of reasons that people create donor advised funds. On a personal level, I'll share, when my sister passed away, one of the things we did was we contacted the local foundation, Cape Cod Foundation, and created a donor advised fund. They collected all these, little donations from all these people who, gave checks for $25 or whatever it was, right?
Yep.
And then, others that were more substantial from family and so forth. And each year, Kristen and I and other members of our family donate to the donor advised fund and have that continue to grow. For many years, we did that as a scholarship for local families, because Bonnie was lived in Mashpee, and so we did something through the Mashpee High School. Now that everyone's out of that age range, we've kind of moved to change the focus to things around. Sometimes she died of melanoma, so there's melanoma research. Someone in the family has MS. We've done stuff around MS, and so forth. You can kind of prioritize. So what do we want to do? There was my sister was athletic, or the kids were now adults, but were athletic. So there was something they were doing. The Cape Cod Foundation suggested there's a fundraising campaign for a YMCA further down the Cape.
Mhm.
Maybe that would be something we wanted. So okay, that's a good suggestion. So there's all kinds of things that you can kind of say, what's our theme, what's our priority, and sometimes evaluate. Well, what we want to do. We've had clients where we've been involved, not with a scholarship intention, but with charitable giving and so forth, where we've been investing their funds for them when it's not being donated. So through this donor advised fund, we continue to be involved, trying to grow that wealth that's ultimately going to go toward charitable intention, and I think that's been a kind of a plus. Someone says, all right, I know I want to put some money aside. I have these highly appreciated shares, or I've got too much in my company stock, or whatever it might be. There can be different reasons. There's a potential change in the tax law. Right. Let's take some money and put it into the donor advised fund. It's good for our charitable deduction that we want this year. Great. Boom, in there. Now we can change how it's invested however we want, and off it goes. Years later, they can be making donations to, charity of choice, college, hospital, any kind of nonprofit. Now, that raises a question of this is donor advised. Mm-hmm. Just because you want something to go to a particular cause doesn't mean it can necessarily go to that cause, right? Most foundations will look at this and say, well, is it an actual nonprofit, right. 403B, et cetera, type filing? Yep. That's not the right. Yeah, that's what it is, right? 403? A nonprofit, right?
501c3.
501c3. Sorry, yep. Getting my numbers. Thank you. Okay. 501c3. Yep. 403B is the retirement account for nonprofits. Yeah, thank you. 501c3 type charitable entity or similar, right? And so they'll look for that kind of status. But they're, churches, hospitals.
It's really broad.
Charities but legitimate charities. Okay. It does not necessarily get to go directly to, there's this poor person, this homeless person on the street. I really want to help them out.
Right.
We can't do that through a donor advised fund. That's a foundation might be able to do that, but a donor advised fund, it goes to charitable organizations that they might deal with that person on the street, but indirectly.
I think most families understand that you can't give it to a person, but it comes up. There is a difference between a nonprofit entity and a charitable entity, as determined by the IRS. So sometimes someone may see a nonprofit and think that they can receive charitable donations that are deductible or qualifying, and sometimes they're not.
Well, you mentioned 501. There's lots of different 501 type classifications, and some may be eligible and some may not be eligible.
Some are related to education, for and so forth. So it's go in with your eyes wide open that perhaps you could run into a charity, or if there is a specific charity that you intend on using, vet that out before you enter a donor advised fund, right?
And keep in mind, there's a couple of things that we might want to think about when selecting a donor advised fund. One is, does the donor advised fund have some of these rules about donation, right? Mm-hmm. We came across one recently that was going to require that if you didn't make a donation within 3 years, they were going to start making donations for you. Oh. If you had made a donation, they'd use whoever you had most recently donated to. If not, they would make their own assessment.
So there's rules in some of them.
Yeah, so that's one kind of thing. Oh, is there a requirement around that? Mm-hmm. Two is maybe when it comes to these donations, it's advised. You're saying, I'd like to go to this. And it is at the discretion of the trustees, essentially, of the foundation to decide is that something they're willing and able to do. So, keep that in mind. Another thing to be tuned into is, can I move the fund? If I'm not happy with this fund, this foundation, can I move it to that foundation? So there are times you can do that, and it's essentially just another charitable gift in effect from A to B. So like a transfer. So these are things to be tuned into. Russ, maybe you did a little just preliminary review of some of the differences in cost and so forth. What are some of the other variables that might come to your mind?
Well, I think, when people are talking about these donor advised funds, they may sound, fancy and, the high minimums and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
For a lot of the donor advised funds, like through Schwab has a donor advised fund, Fidelity you mentioned, I think Vanguard has one. And these are the minimums to start a donor advised fund are really quite low for the most part. To have professional management within the fund, it's a little bit higher. It can be a little bit higher, but just it's pretty accessible to most investors out there. And just the idea to have even people who are donating on a monthly basis. I know a lot of people who do. They have like a basically part of their budget is their donation month to month.
Yeah.
And they can, maybe front load a donor advised fund at the beginning of the year, have that money grow tax free in a relatively safe investment vehicle if they choose to do so, and choose which charities they want to distribute to throughout the year. I think that's a really great option for those people who have charitable inclinations and want to do that throughout the year. But yeah, as to some of the fees, I don't know if we want to.
Yeah, why not? I mean, just this is preliminary research. These things can change. We just were looking at it recently. A few different firms, and keep in mind there's countless community foundations and other options. We're just talking about some of the ones that are in our orbit that we've looked at recently, that relate more to the kind of circumstances we are involved with, where we stay involved in the management of the investments as well. But yeah, what were you going to say?
So it looks like the typical expense rate is about 60 basis points on the first 500,000 or so. So that's a reasonable to
pretty big range. Yeah,
so most people would be
0.6%, 60 basis points, 0.6% rate of charge. And then if you have an investment manager involved, they probably charge something on top of that.
Right. So that's just the administrative fee for the donor advised fund that's handling the contributions.
Yeah. So
and then it scales down from there quite considerably. But I mean, from what I was seeing, I thought it was pretty competitive. 6.6 is quite reasonable compared to even some mutual funds that are out there. So
yeah, there's some administrative costs, and I think again, where you do this can vary, and the scale of the amount you're involved with can vary. Some of these costs as well, and I mentioned some will allow you to. The community foundation will allow you to have a scholarship. Well, most of the ones at a charitable fund that is through a brokerage platform, they're not going to do that.
Right.
It's a different kind of scenario. So, you have to identify what are you trying to accomplish. Will help define where it might make sense to work.
One other detail I want to mention. So you're mentioning that the contribution is deductible, and so it's deductible in the year that you make the donation to the donor advised fund. So let's say, just as an example, let's say you make $100,000 every year. So if you do a cash donation to the donor advised fund, 60% of your adjusted gross income is deductible. So you can donate, if you're making 100,000, let's say that's your adjusted gross income, you can make a donation of 60,000 1 year, and that could all be deducted off your adjusted gross income.
So account as a charitable contribution that you get to take a deduction for.
Right.
Okay.
And if you're doing the same with appreciated stock, it's 30%. So, and that's the market value, the present market value of the contribution. So
there are differences, and this changes from, there have been times this was different amounts at different years. I remember just a few years ago, there were some differences in these numbers. I think it was at the start of the Secure Act or something along those lines. I forget which law came into effect that caused that, but keep that in mind. That what it has been and what it is currently may not always be the same. But it's a good point. So that there's some incentive to use cash in that scenario. On the other hand, there's some virtue to using stock in that we get to avoid the capital gain.
It doesn't have to be all or one category.
All or nothing, right?
That's right.
And I think there's other types of assets. Sometimes people have real estate. Sometimes people have art.
Right.
There can be all kinds of interesting things that might cause people to consider use of a donor advised fund. All right, so some cost ongoing, but the other thing is is it perpetual, or does someone use this for a period of time and then be done with it? Well, it could be either, right?
Yep.
It could be something that's circumstantial and then you're done, or it could be something that you're saying, hey, I want to have this live on for many years for legacy purposes. Right.
There's one other reason that some families decide to do it, or individuals. This can be done confidentially, meaning, sometimes people want to be philanthropic, but they don't really want, for whatever reason, they don't want their name associated with the contribution that they give.
Yeah. Either they don't want a bunch of people asking for more, or they don't necessarily want the recognition.
Yeah. Well, there's an endless list of reasons why people want to keep things private, and you can do that through a donor advised fund. You can make the donation to the charity, without disclosing your name. And there's different rules for foundations, so they have obligations that they have to disclose certain amounts of donations. So if you want it to be strictly confidential and private, a donor advised fund might be a good choice.
Let's just mention a couple things as we wind down. You're not going to be an expert from a quick podcast, but definitely keep this on your radar. Something you might want to learn more about, maybe take advantage of, make use of. Doesn't require, you don't have to be a millionaire,
Right.
big numbers to think about something along these lines. But it's, it is something you probably want to have, certainly discretionary money you're willing to donate to charitable intentions. But there's tax benefits, there's charity benefits, there's control. There's a whole bunch of considerations, and legacy, as we were just talking about. If you want to learn more, there's a nice, we've got a nice little brochure. We got it on the screen for those watching on video. And you can check this out. If you'd like to get a copy of this, reach out to us. We're giving it away. It's just a little bit of information about donor advised funds, give you a little bit of the basics. But I think it's a good thing to consider. Connect to us with an email saying amr-info@wealthenhancement.com. Give us a call, 866-771-8901. Just let us know you're interested in the donor advised fund brochure. We'll send it to you by email, or if you prefer, let us know if you want it in print. We'll print it out for you. And that's donor advised funds. Hope you take advantage of it. If you need help, look, as I mentioned, we certainly offer these as something we help with our clients who do want to have a donor advised fund, but may want it to continue to grow over time. We can be a resource to you, or certainly point you in the right direction if it's something you want a little guidance on. So thanks for listening. Until next time, keep striving for something more.
Thank you for listening to Something More with Chris Boyd. Call us for help, whether it's for financial planning or portfolio management, insurance concerns, or those quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Whatever's on your mind, visit us at somethingmorewithchrisboyd.com or call us toll free at 866-771-8901. Or send us your questions to amr-info@wealthenhancement.com. You're listening to Something More with Chris Boyd Financial Talk Show. Wealth Enhancement Advisory Services and J. Christopher Boyd provide investment advice on an individual basis to clients only. Proper advice depends on a complete analysis of all facts and circumstances. The information given on this program is general financial comments and cannot be relied upon as pertaining to your specific situation. Wealth Enhancement Group cannot guarantee that using the information from this show will generate profits or ensure freedom from loss. Listeners should consult their own financial advisors or conduct their own due diligence before making any financial decisions.